As a way of introduction, my name is Jason Rathje. I am the director of AFVentures, which is a division of AFWERX. And as we're building out this new kind of AFWERX and growing the organization, I'm going to be talking to you today more about the strategy behind AFVentures. Why is this a division of AFWERX now? What is the purpose of AFVentures, and how are we going to execute on the mission that we've set out to accomplish? There are just a ton of, I think, extremely interesting things happening at AFWERX right now, and we have a lot of ongoing programs that I think the folks earlier in the week we're discussing it, and maybe you may have been on some of those calls. I'm going to be talking a little bit about those towards the end of the discussion, but I did want to make sure to level set that today is really going to be a focus on more of the high level reasons behind AFVentures. Why do we exist now, and really open it up for questions on our approach and get any feedback that you may have. I see from the poll that there's quite a few folks who have done business with us already, that have engaged with us in the past, and I look forward to getting your feedback. And then for those of you who are new to the process, I look forward to getting that feedback as well. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and dive in. My goal for today also is to get through this relatively quickly, to leave all the time for a good discussion and questions at the end in the workshop format. So what is AFVentures? AFVentures is a division of AFWERX, but broadly speaking, AFVentures is the department's commercial investment arm. Our mission is to leverage commercial technology to deliver better capability to the warfighter faster. The critical parts of, I think, those first two statements are our focus on commercial. So what do we mean by commercial? I like to think of this as, hey, we're focusing on companies who are developing technologies for commercial application, right? And what we're finding within AFVentures is understanding where the requirement overlap is. And if you're familiar with the military, or how the military budgeting process works more acutely, it all drives back in the Air Force to requirements. What we would call these are defense-focused requirements. This is, I need another F-15. The way that I like to think about AFVentures in our role is understanding what are the commercial requirements. Where is commercial investment in technological development going to meet those for future commercial markets? Just like in general, the DoD focuses on DoD markets, or I like to call them Air Force markets, the combination of an Air Force user and an Air Force customer. I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail in a couple minutes. But the important part here is that we focus on commercial for a number of reasons, and that and it's a unique aspect of what AFVentures brings to the AFWERX organization, as well as the Department of the Air Force. Generally speaking, how we execute this is by generating an open, easy to use process and front door for companies to walk through, right? We want to make this a very easy, simple to use process. We know that isn't universally true. We know that companies who haven't done business with us in the past may have difficulty working within the defense sector. And I'm sure many of you who are on this call who have done business with us already can appreciate some of the difficulties and challenges that you might have in overcoming some of these barriers to entry. But our goal is to make it that really easy front door so that you can enter into doing business with the Air Force. In the ways that we like to work with the community isn't just at the company facing end. We know that the commercial technological ecosystem involves a number of players. One of the most important players in that ecosystem is the investor community. And it's something that I've seen in my experience prior to coming into this role, as well as in interacting with a number of folks across the commercial technological ecosystem, that a focused engagement with our investor community, whether that be venture investment or other forms of private equity investment, or debt and lending programs, for example, is something that we're keenly interested in. Understanding where the commercial markets are going and where investment is going to meet those future demands is critically important to us. And really what we want to do is we want to incentivize and leverage that capital to meet Air Force and national security needs. But why? Why is this so important? And to me, I think this is really kind of summarized nicely in two charts. One is the massive decrease in the percentage of R&D expenditures that come from the federal government. And if any of you are interested in defense investment generally, I'm sure you've seen a slide or a chart very similar to the one on your left, where the decrease in federal expenditures in R&D have now gotten to the point of about 20% of overall expenditures on R&D. There's a number of other graphs that go into this more deeply of where that money is being applied. And I think the important part for us in the department is we know that because investment primarily comes from external sources, not internal sources, that the bulk of new innovation, technological innovation, is going to come from outside of the department, outside of the Air Force's fence line. And so if we don't understand what's happening in the external community and understand ways that we can leverage and capture that for defense needs, then we're missing the opportunity to really expand what we see as a shrinking, consolidating defense industrial base. And so I think that the chart on the right, to me, also really shows, especially on the Air Force side, because these contractors do a lot of business with the Air Force, is that there is a consolidation of the defense industrial base. And what we want to continue to do is grow the amount of companies who consider themselves partners with the DoD. And certainly that is critical for innovation. And I mean, you can read a significant amount of economic literature regarding the ability for companies to innovate. And what we find is that competition drives technological innovation. We think there's a way to do this in partnership with the prime industry, who has been, remarkable partners to the Air Force over many, many years. But we want to make sure that we capture new innovations wherever they might be and drive them into areas where our operators can take best advantage of them. And so because of the shrinking base of innovation, as well as the decrease in the relative percentage of federal R&D and defense R&D, more bluntly, in regard to spending in technological innovation, the Air Force has chosen to stand up this commercial investment arm to leverage that commercial investment, to leverage investment in technologies outside of the defense line to help grow that industrial base. And so you could see that manifested in our vision. We are developing the 21st century industrial base for defense. And Dr. Roper has said multiple times, and it's a quote that I've certainly latched onto, is we're not interested in growing the defense industrial base. We're interested in growing the industrial base interested in defense. The important part of this, really, from a vision perspective, is partnerships with the communities who may have been non-interested or haven't worked with us in the past. And that requires a significant amount of focus and understanding within the Air Force that we don't have innately right off the bat. And so a big part of what we do at Ventures to achieve this vision is engaging with an industrial base who may not have been interested in working with us, listening, and trying to build programs and policies around those engagements to help better foster these capabilities. But ultimately, like any other organization, we're going to be judged on how successful we are. And I think a big part of our success to date has come through a specific program in partnership with the Air Force's SBIR and STTR portfolio. I do want to make sure before we jump into this that it's clear that, as the commercial investment arm for the Air Force, we see ourselves as the managers of a series of fiduciary and non-fiduciary funds and programs that are going to assist in us achieving our mission objectives. The SBIR program is one of a number of vehicles that we bring to bear today and plan to bring to bear in the future. And so the focus that we have today on growing and scaling technology ventures will always be the same, no matter where they come from, whether that's domestic startups, small businesses, or looking at academia and university partners, nonprofits, or large companies. There's an expansive engagement strategy that is being planned by the Air Force right now. And I'm very excited to, in the near future, announce some additional offerings that we plan to bring to bear. But this discussion right now is really focusing on our SBIR portfolio, which is the most sizable fund that we manage. The way we execute that portion of our AFVentures portfolio is through a matching stepping stone engagement strategy. We feel strongly that in order to understand and leverage commercial development, we need to allow commercial companies to pitch their ideas and take a lot of small bets in companies who are really bullish on what they're working on and give them the opportunity to succeed in the Air Force marketplace. We know that doesn't come cheap. We know that no matter how hard we try to lower the barriers to entry, there will always be barriers to entry into any marketplace. But specifically within the DoD, there's certain things that you are going to have to overcome to be successful in this market. And so we seed companies $50,000 for these small bets after evaluating their ideas on the merit of the technology and its applicability to the national defense apparatus. We offer these 3 times a year where companies can come in and pitch their ideas. Now, in this topic, we do identify start to work with us along the way. The second part of what we do is product market match. If, as you come in with these small bets and you're doing your feasibility analysis, which is really what you're doing in that $50,000 phase 1, is you're saying, hey, how feasible is my technology into this Air Force mission set? Is you're going to have the opportunity very quickly to pitch for a larger contract award up to $750,000 to do product market assessment through prototyping activity, where now you're developing that technology, you're doing the R&D work required, including test and evaluation, in order to showcase how your product might be developed to meet an Air Force mission set. There are opportunities for additional funding along the way that I'm not going to go over today in any great detail, but certainly as you involve in the process, just because you're starting into this second step, really what we see this is the catalyst to be able to understand the applicability of your development work into an Air Force mission set. Ultimately, we know that one of the big ways that companies need to scale is really to become programs of record. And if you're unfamiliar with the Air Force or the military apparatus, the way we do our budgeting cycle is via these programs of record. We know that process takes a long time, and that process is guided by Congress outside of our own eminent domain to effect. But we also know that we can and should invest in companies so that they can grow their businesses along the way to be applicable to this planning and budgeting process. And that's where these big bets come in. Every year, we're going to award a few dozen, hopefully, depending on the quality of the proposal, as well as funds available, of these really big scaled investment, really up to $15 million of our funding, of SBIR funding that the AFVentures portfolio leads will have ownership over. in order to scale your concept and idea into meeting a big Air Force need. And so, that without belaboring these points too much, really the way that we work within the SBIR portfolio is allow companies to enter, scale appropriately, do the prototyping test work to validate the market. And then for those few companies who require it, provide that additional capital to really ensure that the technology is going to meet, a big Air Force market need. Now, I mentioned briefly, and not to belabor this point too much, how do you know whether or not you're a brand new company into this sector? How do you know whether or not your product meets an Air Force need, or what you're developing could use additional funding to meet an Air Force need? There are multiple ways. In the open topic solicitation, we'll always have focus areas. These technological focus areas will be able to highlight specific areas of technological development that the Air Force is keenly interested in. Above that, we'll also have mission areas that will be readily available for all AFVentures activities, not just pertaining to SBIR and STTR related funding opportunities that are going to be available on the AFWERX website. And within those opportunities, we'll signal to the wider audience mission areas that customers are currently interested in understanding how new technologies may improve their workflow. And within these, you're finding and identifying customers. And I want to make that very clear. The way that we operate is by aligning incentives, and we feel that our process here is not perfect, but it does a fairly good job of aligning revenue incentives for companies to customer needs and customer demands. And where we overlap those successfully is where we find customers who have real demands, and we have companies we were able to seed R&D funding in order to develop a technology or capability that meets those demands along the way. Those might be a small revenue opportunity on the order of a few $100,000 a year. It might be a huge opportunity in the order of millions or billions of dollars in the future. We are not we're scale agnostic. We have customers all over the Air Force who have different levels of needs. But one of the great ways to achieve those are through these focus areas or mission areas, which we're going to continue to iterate on. And I highly recommend continuing to check on the AFWERX website and the AFVentures portals on the AFWERX website for any additional information regarding our conversation today. Now, when you're working through your process, really what we're looking to do is get after those customer assessments, right? And so when we talk about companies who are going through our open topic SBIR process, the really important part of this is finding and working with customers who are going to be massive stakeholders and supporters of they're going to be champions of what you're doing. And this is a two-way conversation, but it really is essential to the performance of the AFVentures portfolio. And I think there's multiple ways to do this. We highly recommend partnering early and often, and when we make these opportunities available through things like collider events, where we're going to host companies and potential customers for mixing events to ensure that we're getting the proper translation. We do believe strongly within AFVentures that problems help define solutions, just like solutions help define problems. It's a two-way street, and to separate these two into independent activities does a disservice, I think, to the ideation and innovation that's happening across all areas of the innovation process, whether that's in the commercial sector or within, inside the Air Force fence line. I want to make this really apparent here, and this is kind of my get off the mic slide. We currently have an open solicitation for our STTR program. Now, our STTR program is like the SBIR program, that it's targeting small businesses, U.S.-owned businesses under 500 employees. But the real big difference here is the research, the research nonprofit institution has to be part of the partnership agreement within the STTR program, and they have to complete at least 30% of the total amount of work. The small business itself must complete at least 40%. That there's a trade-off in there, however you'd like to set this up. This is for companies who are interested in partnering with universities, and producing an outcome from that. Now, I said universities. What I really meant was not-for-profit research institutions. Those can be universities. They do not have to be universities. There's additional information pertaining to those specific differences on the AFWERX website. I do want to put stomp that proposals are due for this by 10 August. That's just within a couple weeks. We have AMAs lined up next week, and you can see the application website there. Again, go to the AFWERX website and you'll find all of this information on the AFWERX website as well, and we'll have additional solicitations in the out years. All right, with that, I want to open it up to questions. Can we unmute everybody in the
Hey, Jason,
workshop?
We also have some questions in chat that folks started asking. I started answering some of those. The first one that we have that isn't answered is from John, and he's asking, are there other Avengers type programs in other DoD branches or just the Air Force?
Yes, there's kind of there's certain derivatives to everybody's got kind of different flavors to this. What I can say is every service has a great focus on commercial technology ventures in the same way that we do. Naval X in the Navy, for example, DIU is a DoD focused organization, Army Futures Command. So there's a lot of really great organizations, Trust Capital Marketplace and OSD Industrial Policy. We do work closely with our sister services as well as our OSD counterparts across the board. Everybody's got a kind of a different approach. What I do want to mention is that we have a lot of the contracts that we fund or support are joint efforts. We do a lot of work with SOCOM, we do a lot of work with the Navy and the Army in co-funding some of these projects. And so certainly it's a good opportunity, I think, through our process to find ways of partnering with other services. I do want to make it very clear, though, we are an Air Force organization. Our funds are Air Force appropriated dollars. And so there has to be along those an Air Force requirement that they will meet along the way. So we won't fund an Army tank program, for example. Over. Hey, Joe, if you could help me kind of go through these here and where we've got some of these that you haven't answered yet, I'd certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So the next question we have is, what do you need as indications of interest from commercial clients as well as our Air Force stakeholders, push notes, MOU, LOI, or just a PM statement?
So what we'll need, what the bare minimum will be posted in the solicitation when we're going forward to an award of contract, right? So every round we're constantly experimenting with this process and we're constantly making changes, right? The intent is to make this process more effective over time using a data-driven approach. And I hope to, in future iterations of this discussion, kind of show you how we do this, show you how we experiment with this process, how do we use lessons learned and bake that in. But because of that, I can't give you a good answer. The solicitation itself, which will be posted for the specific area, for the specific offering or fund that we'll be offering future contracts to, will be available, and it will state very clearly what the required kind of needed interest formats are that will require for a specific award. I will say signaled interest in phase one is great. That's kind of our phase one open topic. It's not required, and there'll always be an offering that we will put out for companies who have never worked with the Air Force before. That's critical to what we do, baked into the strategic reasons on why we exist. And so there will always be an opportunity for a company to come in and say, hey, my widget or what I'm developing, I think the Air Force could use this thing. Let me go forward and submit an application and see what happens.
Jason, another great question we have is, what are some of the biggest factors that determine if a company receives a small bet, product market match, or a big bet?
So yeah, so this is great. So let me dive into our specifically to our SBIR portfolio. So companies will apply to anything you want to apply to. So there's certain requirements and restrictions because of the funds, depending on the fund that we're working in. So here we're working with the SBIR fund or the STTR fund, and I kind of talked a little bit about the restrictions for the STTR program, the SBIR program, in this discussion. The important part of all of these things is that companies can choose to apply where they want to apply. So if you want to apply for a phase 1, you apply for a phase 1. If you want to apply for a phase 2, that's that bigger contract award, there will be additional requirements. Now, normally you can achieve those and you can have the successes in phase 1 that will lead you to a successful phase 2. But that's not required to jump into a phase 2. So we have an offering called a direct to phase 2 where you can go and apply for that. That is a much more rigorous process, to be frank. It's not rigorous in the standpoint of what you might think of, 1,000-page proposals, right? We're talking a 15-page technical volume, but that's different than a 5-page technical volume for phase 1. It's also going to take you longer to get an award. Quite frankly, these are more detailed contracts. They require more detailed analysis on our side, where phase 1s are really kind of standard contract actions. The big bets are special. Those are kind of different for a number of reasons. You have to be one of our companies already in order to be eligible for one of those big bets, right? So you can't come off of the street and be eligible for, as it stands today, and eligible for one of those big bet awards, right? We're awarding, these kind of larger contract actions. And that's because we require a significant amount of diligence, not just for the company, but for the government. And I think an important part that I'd love to, make kind of give everyone a peek behind the curtain is, a lot of our time is spent in the details and the weeds of working with government customers, right? And it's a big part of what we do that we think makes companies more successful in their growth is working with those government customers, helping them understand you as a company, and also understand what their commitment is from our government stakeholders. And because of that, we don't have those big bets are put aside for companies who have already come through the process.
Jason, why don't we take a live question?
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
In the meantime, one of the questions that came in is, hey, what's the difference between sort of the AFVentures portfolio and the AFWERX challenge process? There was a little misnomer in the question of you're only allowed to apply to one or the other. I want to make it very clear that you could apply to be a part of the AFWERX challenge process and be a part of the open topic process as well throughout this time.
100%.
David Schaffendunk. I was actually the gentleman who asked that question. This is from a day one discussion that we had. I understand it's actually once you're awarded one of the contracts, if you're with SBIR or STTR. So I'm just sort of trying to get an understanding is what is sort of the AFWERX Connect challenge. There hasn't been a lot of detail or what's sort of on the back end of this in terms of, is it a feed-in point to the SBIR, STTR process, or is there some other mechanism that's sort of being awarded out of that? And
Yeah,
then the question I have is that we already have an LOI with Air Force's Global Strike Command. So I'm having dealt with government before, I'm deathly afraid about getting multiple entities involved with contracts. So I'm assuming that Global Strike Command would still maintain their own process and other government agencies, that you don't supersede anything. Is that correct?
So I think maybe I'll just kind of expand on this a bit, and then you let me know if I don't answer the question. So the only restriction that exists kind of legally on a lot of these things are really core restriction is that you can't be awarded twice for the same level of effort, right? So I can't, if Global Strike's going to fund you for building a widget and I fund you for building that same widget, that is a huge legal no-no, right? The government's not going to fund you twice for the same work. And that's where the companies really need to be careful. Now, you can apply for the same work 100%. So you can apply to be part of X, Y, and Z solicitation with the same proposal if you wanted to, if it worked within the solicitation guidelines. And from my perspective, I often advertise, hey, you can apply for a phase 1 with us and a direct to phase 2, right? We need to do the deconfliction on our side afterwards to ensure that you're going to stick with one and not the other. And often, if you're going to get awarded multiple opportunities to do the same work, we're going to push that back and say, hey, you guys got to pick and choose what pathway do you want to go forward with. Now, for us, it's you're not going to get a phase 1 and a direct to phase 2, right? That doesn't make any sense with the process. Now, you can. The way we structure it is you're always eligible every solicitation to apply with whatever project you're working on. Within the SBIR portfolio, you can apply to different SBIR topics. So we are just one part of the SBIR, Air Force SBIR program, right? And I want to make that very clear. AFVentures is one part of the Air Force SBIR program. We are not, AFVentures does not own the Air Force SBIR program. This Air Force SBIR program does not own AFVentures. We manage a portion of the SBIR fund on behalf of the Air Force in coordination with the Air Force SBIR office. And they're great partners through this entire process. They do the contracting activity. They do the finance activity. So that all of that is centralized, and it's centralized across the Air Force, by the way. So we consider ourselves one partner. What I'm talking about is our process. Now, as far as how we integrate with the Air Force, the AFWERX challenges, there is no direct connection as far as you end the challenge and then you go right into a SBIR program. There's a process that we're putting in place now to help us work through and ideate what are better ways to connect these, but AFVentures as an organization is about a month old. And so the goal is to get there in the near future as we grow AFWERX 2.0. You hit on a really important point. Connectivity across the portfolio is critically important. But right now, those things are disconnected. I will say that within the challenge construct, you have a great opportunity to meet customers and get an LOI, get something along these customer memorandum formats, and then apply to a direct to phase 2. And we've seen a lot of challenge recipients be very successful going that route. And so I think challenges are a good corollary and supporter, and there is an indirect connection through those mechanisms where you can find customers through these processes and then use those to kind of not skip, but not be required to go through a phase 1 because you've already kind of accomplished those objectives. You've already demonstrated technical feasibility via another mechanism, and now you just want to go right into direct to phase 2. And that's why we make that option available. Did that answer your question, or did I miss something there?
Yeah, I guess the biggest takeaway for me is that you can apply multiple places, and if you get accepted multiple places, it's the Air Force's due diligence to sort of say, okay, we have to now sit in behind and sort of figure out what it is that we're going to slot you into and discuss with you that process. So it's not necessarily up to us to sort of manage that. Is that correct?
Opposite. So that very clear distinction. It is your responsibility as the company to not take the same money from 2 different sources to do the same work, right? Okay. And that is not just for the Air Force. That's across the federal space. So if you charge the state of Wisconsin and the Air Force for the same work, then you are going to be held legally viable, or legally there's a potential to be held in legal violation of violating statute, and that's baked into all contract language.
So the best thing is that if we go through processes and we end up in an enviable position where multiple acceptances come back, then we just have to reach out to you folks to say, all right, how do we move forward on this? Like if we've applied multiple programs and we get multiple acceptances, we just have to go back to you guys and say, help us sort it out.
Yeah, and I think we're happy to talk to you about it, but it's going to be your decision. I mean, you're the company. Congratulations on your success.
Yeah.
Enviable place to be for sure. Yeah, that is totally the corporate decision, and it's whatever way you want to bring your company, and bring it to bear, I think is important to you.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for that question. I think that's super helpful. I think we've got 3 minutes here. Any other questions, thoughts, feedback?
Coming in and out of mesh, and you will transition from a spiral bevel to a hypoid to a worm. You're going more from a rolling action to a sliding action. And the sliding action, of course, causes the greatest amount of friction. So anytime you generate heat, you decrease the amount of efficiency, or it takes more power. You less power out versus the power in. So that's really what we're trying to point out here with the different types of gear meshes. And the other one that we didn't show you here is the mesh associated with helical gears, which is purely a rolling element, and they're also considered very, very high efficiency. So you will typically
Sorry, everyone. I'm not exactly sure what happened there.
The high 90s, for example.
I'm getting feedback from AFWERX. There, I think that might have went away there. I think we only have 2 minutes now left. Nope, never mind.
Keep lubrication.
You can find my contact information on the AFWERX website under the AFVentures tab. Please go there, and if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I appreciate everyone's time and feedback and questions through this process, and we'll continue to hold these AMAs. Please apply to the STTR program 20.alpha if you are, or 20.delta, I apologize, if you feel that you're eligible for that. Go check that AMA out. That's on 3 August. It's a great opportunity, really fantastic program. Jared Evans, who runs that program for AFVentures, does a fantastic job with these AMAs. A really good job at helping and working with companies on how to apply and be successful in the program. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end it before we get cut back off by AFWERX kind of leadership here. Thanks again for your time, everyone out here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everybody. Hey, for the folks that didn't get all their questions answered, we'll be posting this on the AFWERX website in a couple days, and we'll continue to do these AMAs. The one quick thing I do want to mention is the AFWERX challenge process does have a commercial solutions opening that any government customer can use to contract with companies through the challenge process. So if you guys have any further questions, feel free to shoot them to support@afwerx.af.mil, and we'll get them routed to the right folks to get you answers.